Good morning, Kevin. Good afternoon, Max. How are you guys today?
Yeah, very good this morning. Thanks, Adrian. How are you?
Doing great. It's good to see you both.
It's great to be here.
Danielle, thank you so much for joining. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join. Bob, hello. As you're joining today, please let us know where you're joining from. Use the chat function at the bottom of Zoom. It's always fun to see where people are dialing in from. Max, where are you dialing in from today?
I'm in Bristol in the UK, so southwest of England.
Very nice. And Kevin, how about yourself?
I am in Reno, Nevada.
How's everything in Reno?
Can't complain. It's beautiful outside. It's the perfect temperature, not too hot, not too cold.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Well, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with both of you today. Again, for everybody who's joining, I'm Adrian Cohn, and I head up marketing here at Smartli. And we're looking forward to a great conversation about digital experiences today, launching new digital properties. Let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat below. And throughout the entire presentation, if you have questions or comments, feel free to use the chat. These are most fun and most successful when there's a good dialogue. You can also use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom bar if you have questions for me, Max, or Kevin throughout the webinar. And as always, we'll record these and we'll be posting it on our website so you can watch it later, share it with your colleagues, things like that. So without further ado, Max, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know which company you're with and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Max. I am the Global Digital Content Manager at Contentsquare. I'll go into a bit more what we do as a business later, but I was kind of leading the globalization of our new website rollout over this year. So taking it from English through to 6 different languages.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super excited to hear about this story. And Kevin, you're over at KPS3.
Yeah, so I'm COO over at KPS3, and we're a 40-person brand and digital agency based out of Reno, Nevada. I oversee the various divisions that make up the actual services, so branding, digital, those elements, and specifically with the Contentsquare redesign, I played the role of creative and technical director.
Awesome. Kevin, it's great to speak with you here today as well, because you and I have actually known each other now for maybe 4 years, because this is the second customer of Smartlings that you've implemented in partnership with us. And it's always good to work with you.
Yep, the same here.
So what we're going to talk about today is how Contentsquare built its new marketing site worldwide in just 4 months. Max, I know that you weren't on board with this project throughout the entirety of the lifespan, but can you walk us through a little bit of why you all decided to rebuild your marketing site and what this general timeline looked like?
Sure. So we are a French business. We've been growing fairly quickly, very quickly since about 2012. And we got to a point late in 2019 where the website that we had wasn't growing or wasn't suitable for the growth of both the business and the product. So we embarked on this project to start redesigning it, making it suitable for not just for us, but for our customers, our prospects to find the content that they needed. So we went through quite a stringent process, ended up selecting KPS3 to embark on this project with us. And that building of the website started Q1 this year. And we plugged it into Smartling, as it says here, middle of that quarter. Launched the English language sites in the end of March, beginning of April, so Q1, Q2, and then the remaining 5 or 6 languages on top of that throughout the rest of this year. And then, the first 45 days after launch, when we compared them to the 45 days before, we achieved 3x in demo crests, which is a pretty cool place to start when you're launching that.
That's awesome. So Max, maybe can you tell us a little bit about Contentsquare? What does the platform do?
Sure. So we're an experience analytics platform. So basically we give brands the power to deliver better digital experiences for their customers through unique behavioral metrics, democratization of data within the business, and then visualizations that allow you to take action on the data and insight that you're surfacing through zone-based heat maps, session replay, AI alerts, and loads more that I won't go into. And we do that for over 700 enterprise clients in over 25 countries around the world. And we make those insights accessible to every team and give them the ability to measure how their actions within those teams affect the user experience across the website, mobile, and app, whether that's analysts, marketing, IT and ops, design and UX. We give you the insights that are relevant to you wherever you sit within the business.
That's so cool. And what I understand is that through the process of rebuilding your own website, you also leverage the data that your platform has to understand how to go about rebuilding your site.
Sure. I mean, when your company mission is to, as I said, empower brands to create better experiences, it helps to have a website that makes people happy, or at least helps them find what it is they're looking for. Unfortunately, for a while, our own digital experience wasn't keeping up with the pace of our business. And by the time we got to the beginning of this year, we were long overdue that redesign. And it's no coincidence, really, that internally we called the redesign and the replatforming Project Champagne. Now, yes, we're a French company, so it fits. But also, drinking your own champagne, I think, is a saying coined by Pegasystems CIO Joe Hopper that refers to a company using its own product or services to essentially practice what they preach. And because we're the largest player in our space, and as part of our journey to be a major player in the SaaS space, we kind of had to follow that mantra. So we took the Contentsquare platform, analyzed our old site, and pulled out some really key metrics and key findings that would help drive forward, where we wanted the site to go and how we wanted people to use it. What we discovered was that over 40% of the exposure rate or less than 40% of the exposure rate was below the fold, so people weren't scrolling. And that didn't change between interested buyers, so whether they requested a demo or whether they didn't. And actually below the fold was the logo grid. So I know, Kevin, you've got some thoughts on logo grids generally. But yeah, a question we asked ourselves was, are logo grids really that interesting?
It was an interesting process to go through, right? I mean, as an agency, we're looking at analytics all the time, but rarely are our clients actual analytics companies that work to improve user experience. And so having access to their platform, and uniquely, one of the things that Contentsquare has is a set of internal analysts that usually collaborate with their clients, right? And so we were able to work with one of those. They specialize on the platform. They teach people how to use the platform. They showed our digital team, they showed our design team, they showed all of us how to use the platform as well. So we were able to get our own insights, but then we were also able to collaborate with their analysis. So this is, one screenshot of many that we were able to find. But it really did start to highlight some areas that as we were doing our research, as we were doing our data, that we were able to try to keep in the back of our mind as we were going throughout. And it was really refreshing to kind of have this new analytical insights that we wouldn't have normally had, which really showed that, like Max said, people who requested a demo and people who didn't, no one was scrolling past that logo grid. Simultaneously, no one was interacting with the logo grid. There was a very low exposure rate, below this fold. And as an agency, we talk about the fold being a myth all the time and do long pages work. And it was really great to see some actionable data that kind of led us down this path, which we'll talk about later more in the process.
I find this all really interesting because, it's obvious that 100% of the users are going to see the header and the hero, but your hope as a developer of a website and as a marketing team is that people are going to go down as far into the page as you've built it. But as you've pointed out here, below the fold line, it's just so few, only a handful of users on a percentage basis would get below that fold line. So one of the outcomes that my slides are not advancing on cue. One of the outcomes that we had looked at and discussed on the last slide was, are logo grids useful? And I thought that this was a particularly interesting outcome from the research that was conducted by Max, by your team, and Kevin, is that case studies for performed differently based on the region in which they were served. So Avis, which is an American company, had a click-through rate of 7.5% on the American website, but on the French website, its click-through rate was less than 0.5 percentage point.
Yeah, this was fantastic. So what we were able to do, the old website had 3 languages as part of it. Contentsquare was on all of them. It used a very similar theme across the board. There were certain elements that were localized, but probably not as much as it could, or as any website. I mean, we can always get more localized with our content. But one thing we were able to do is go to the case study section and look at how everything was performing. We have these giant logo grids of case studies. What is interesting to the different audiences? Obviously, Contentsquare started as a French company. It grew a ton in France, but then has become kind of a global powerhouse in the analytics space. And with that is, a headquarters on the US side as well. And so seeing what is interesting to those different audiences across the board, this is one example where we were able really to see, okay, it makes a lot more sense to highlight Avis probably on the US or the global side, but on the French side, this customer does not resonate well. What customers do resonate well? What can we take away from that to ensure that, the regional marketing teams can inform and update their website appropriately to make sure that the content is engaging across the board and not using the same kind of cookie cutter, templates or content across all the languages.
I think this is such an interesting outcome because this is localization, right? This is not a translation problem. We'll get to translation in a few minutes, but what this demonstrates is that having a locale specific or regionally specific website and message that's beyond the text is essential to engaging your users. It's just a really awesome outcome. Max, was there anything you wanted to add about this?
No, I mean, other than beyond this specific analysis, what we've learned since through using the site is it's not just down to logos. So it's also industry specific. So there are certain industries that resonate really well in some regions that when you put those across onto other sites, it's similar. It's not because the logo isn't well known. It's just the audience base for those businesses, or those, the majority of those businesses are based in one locale. So, for instance, in France, a lot of our luxury customers are based in France. But when you stick those case studies on other sites, they don't resonate as well as Avis might, or a financial services one might in the US, or a pure play retailer in the UK.
Awesome. So, Kevin, with the data, we're just showing everybody who's watching today two data points that we were looking at when you were rebuilding the Contentsquare website. There were a plethora of data that you and the team combed through to start understanding what would make the most sense to build a new web property. You are extremely experienced. I mean, everything you do at KPS3 is building digital experiences today. What are the key attributes to building a great end user experience?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We break it down into, kind of 3 areas, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth. But the first one being the data, right? What information is available to us? It's different with every client. It's different with every industry. When we're looking at how we can create actionable insights, how we can create a strategy that we can actually, derive an experience from, we need to figure out what we have access to. What kind of analytics are installed? Have they done research in the past? What are customers saying on the internet about this company? And what does the competitive landscape look like? All of those individual things, end up being the data that we try to collect in the planning phase to ensure that there's a good and positive outcome once we get later on. The second portion is kind of the tools, right? And I think this is one portion that's very often overlooked early in a process. We've all been that person who you're requesting access to someone's software or a password to a tool account that you're going to integrate, and you get the email with the username and the password from it, and you go, okay, awesome, I have this, I did it early, great. It's 3 weeks later, you're actually going to use it, and you try to log in and the username or the password doesn't work, or the link is expired, and you're like, oh great, now I can't get in. And so that's how tools for websites often are. But what we like to do is we like to think about them much earlier in the process, because ultimately what also makes a great end user experience are the tools that make the back end easy to use. If you cannot build a website that a marketing team for a client can update and wants to update and stays consistent and polished for years to come, you're not going to have a great front end experience because they're not going to be able to scale it in a proper way. So the tools are incredibly important when it comes to building out a back end that people can use as well. And then the last part's bringing it all together, right? The creativity. So it's kind of the secret sauce. What have we learned from the data? What insights can we take? How can we put those together with the tools that we have to end up, creating and pitching an experience that works, that we can build, that they want to update, and it all comes together. One of the things that we really like is that we work across a wide array of industries, right? So when we look at data, we look at tools, we also look at what other industries do we work in? How can we leverage what we know from travel and tourism to tell a better B2B story? Elements like that really help kind of seal the deal and make all of the research and the planning up front worth it and kind of come together. So those are the 3 areas that we typically look at when it comes to the experience as a whole.
Awesome. Well, let's dive a little deeper into the data part, because this is where Contentsquare started, and this is the industry in which Contentsquare really operates. And we're all hungry for information to inform decisions. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you think through the utilization of data, where you get it, and how it creates a meaningful direction for how to build an engaging user experience?
Yeah. For this project specifically, I mean, again, right, dream come true. Analytics platform had it on their own site. It was fantastic. So the first thing we usually do, because the client might not even be aware of what analytics or what elements are actually on their website. So we'll even look through their website code sometimes just to see what kind of integrations are there. And it's all about finding what we have to work with, right? So talking about the client, seeing what analytics they have, can they get us access, who owns the Google Analytics account, if it's someone who left 5 years ago, how can we get that account back so that we can actually find it. There's a lot of detail that you can get from Google Analytics, deeper content and deeper meaning if you look at it, but there's a 50-50 shot on if it's actually even set up right and not counting, double bounce or self-referral. So there's all sorts of things that we look at from that side. Contentsquare was awesome to have as part of this project, and it's informed a lot of strategy using their analytics, partnering with their team. We also like to look at their lead data. A lot of the times when we're working with B2B SaaS companies in particular, they have lead gen. It's built into who we are when we're doing this kind of work. So can we look at that historical data? What can we, glean from it? Can we look and see how many people have signed up? Can we see what their titles are? Can we see what kind of content was engaging to them? Can we see how many times it took them visiting a property before they converted? All of those kind of elements that we can do a deep dive into will help us inform the different kinds of personas. And eventually what we want to do with every kind of project, especially a larger one that spans countries or spans a wide variety of audiences like Contentsquare, I mean, you have a whole section of the app that's built just for designers versus another section that's built for digital marketing specialists versus another section that appeals to CMOs and VPs of marketing. And those are vastly different audiences, and age and demo and location and what they're interested in feature-wise is very different. And so we try to take this data, we try to figure out what's interesting to people on the website. We try to figure out what ultimately lets people convert, what content are they interested in, and then what kind of secondary research can we do to put together personas for this project. Where did they most likely go to college? What is their job? What are they looking for? Which pages are they probably going to land on? One of the things that we find with this data all the time that people often find surprising, but when you think about it, it's not, of a larger company with a big brand presence and strong organic SEO, their homepage visits are usually around 30%. 30% of your visitors will see your homepage. 70% are going directly to somewhere else. And so as agencies, a lot of the time we have a tendency to put all this effort and all this work on the homepage, right? And we're doing homepage designs, and those are what we iterate on, and we're trying to make the homepage as beautiful as possible. And then you see a bunch of secondary templates that are kind of, thrown to the wind. When in reality, 30% of the people are seeing your homepage, maybe they're just validators. Maybe they're not even the people looking for the product at the first go. They're the ones being told by, someone below them, hey, this is a really great tool. I think we need to do this. So then they Google that name and they find the homepage. That should probably tell a different story than one of those landing pages that the specialist is looking for, that is looking for something specific. And so trying to get data to really figure out what story to tell there, I think is ultimately what we're trying to do, and really do a deep dive into the data so that we can create the best and most accurate personas to then guide the rest of the process.
Nice. Max, any thoughts on data in the process of creating the end user experience?
No, I mean, in terms of how we used those personas, is basically how we then went about the content production process. And that the data that informed those personas in the first place really helped us decide how we were going to structure that content and which parts of the product we were going to pitch at which of those personas. And we built the why Contentsquare section and targeted it at user roles, at personas, and the challenges and the problems that we solve, and we help our customers overcome.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit then about the tools, because once you have all the information, you have to start building out a new experience. And Kevin, how did you think through the process of rebuilding Contentsquare's website from a tooling perspective?
So I'd say the majority of the time, we have a couple different options here and a couple different decisions we had to make, but I would say this is also very surface level compared to what we were actually looking at. Most people come in with the CMS in their mind, right? They know what kind of content management system they want to use. Their team has experience with it. The people in charge have experience with it. There's usually some kind of, internal bias toward that. And so choosing a CMS usually always happens early in the process. But there's a lot of other tools that go into kind of making up the experience as well. And something that I, said earlier, which I believe is truly important, is when you're working with a company that has regional marketing teams, that has, if you're a 5-person marketing team versus a 50, it doesn't matter. The site still has to be easy to update, right? There are agencies and there are places where they will make all the changes for you, but that's not what we want to do, right? We want to build great digital experiences and we want to iterate on them. And so when we're talking about feature updates and we're talking about adding new things, we want to add new functionality, extend new functionality, ultimately give the client and give someone like Contentsquare the ability to handle the website themselves, completely from start to finish without it feeling cookie cutter. And what goes into that is planning with the tools up front. And so obviously the driver, originally was, which CMS do we use? We were kind of torn between two for this project. We workshopped it. And I think most importantly, we don't recommend what tools to use until all the data and the research is done. As part of the data and the research, we did, over 10 key stakeholder interviews, from the COO down to, kind of the lead sales guy. And in there, we were talking about what's interesting to people, what's interesting to clients, but then we also spoke to people on the back end. How do they update the website? What are they looking for out of it? And we're able to kind of see and get a feel for the comfort level of the team and what kind of solution would work for them. So the first one was WordPress versus Contentful. WordPress, everybody knows for the most part. Contentful, some do in the B2B SaaS space. And, I would say it's a little bit more modern. Each one has its pros or cons. WordPress is very easy to update. You have live page views. There's a lot that goes into making a WordPress website easy to use for people who aren't super technical. Contentful offers a different kind of path in terms of, better site speed, less security issues, all of the content's hosted off site, but you don't get that same kind of visual editing experience of seeing your content in places you're doing it. So it can be a little bit harder to do things quickly and you're kind of guessing on some of the fields. They also are lacking some of the features of just kind of like repeatable field groups and things like that. So when weighing all those pros and cons, our recommendation was ultimately WordPress. We believe with the experience that they're trying to generate, with how the front end will look in terms of being, complex and beautiful, but also simple at the same time, a lot of shapes, things happening everywhere, it would be great for users to be able to see what they're editing. And so that's kind of the first path. Outside of that, and once you kind of get the CMS down, you can start looking at things like plugins and integrations. And that's where things can often get overlooked, right? So we're looking at, we never use pre-made plugins for the most part, unless it's making the backend easier in something like WordPress. The last thing you want are slider plugins or plugins that say they'll make your website responsive. They're just disasters waiting to happen on update. But there's so many plugins that are useful, right? You have something like Yoast for SEO, or you have something like Drift for integration of chatbots. You can, leverage something like Clearbit for personalization or IP tracking, on the back end. We try to think about all that stuff early in the process. And obviously, as part of this process, right, translation services, we knew that scaling to languages was going to be an important thing. We knew that the previous, integration of how they were handling multi-site and languages was not working or scaling well. And so going into that process was something that we knew worked seamlessly. Smartling was a no-brainer and something that we planned on and started very early so that we had enough runway to get it set up, work through the details, configure it, and ultimately when we were done with our end, set up that automated flow so that Max's team could just hit the ground running with all the languages. One of the big things that we look at with tools as well, we've worked with products a lot, specifically SaaS products, and quite a few of us have UI and UX backgrounds in product design, and the tools kind of lead to this philosophy that we're not a fan of the 3-year redesign. Like I think most of us have heard that, right? Like every 3 years you go back out and someone goes back out to RFP or however it works and redesign their website completely. Maybe it's at 2 years now. I can't even tell anymore. But what we like to do is we like to stay involved. We like to be iterative with it. Instead of dedicating a large sum of money every 3 years, split that up over the years and keep improving your website. And by having, right, a strong technical stack, by having, kind of a plan for scaling early, you're able to do that. You're able to keep updating the website in a way that doesn't break everything, that enhances certain areas that then you can apply to previous areas. And it lets teams be more nimble and ultimately, I think, want to update their own website as opposed into getting stuck into something that is hard to update, difficult, cumbersome, things like that.
Yeah. And when you think about translation, when it comes to tooling, Kevin, what are the key attributes that you're looking for?
It has to be easy. It has to be automated. I mean, you're talking about something that is complex down to its core, and people I don't think realize the complexity of translation sometimes until they've been in a project that deals with it, and then every time after you realize the complexity of translation. And so something that makes the process seamless, I think, is ultimately what we're looking for, right? We want something, when we think about a website design, we do what's called component driven design, and it's a principle from product design, right? It's breaking a design down into scalable and modular components that are branded, that are designed, and that are consistent. And by doing this, we're able to collaborate with Max and Contentsquare's creative director and their creative team. What is the brand? What is the vision? We can build out the scalable and modular approach to design that they're able to then deploy to the web. Well, what that often ends up with, that means a lot of pages that have custom layouts, a lot of pages that have custom fields, a lot of pages that just look different and don't follow a formula. And so when we're looking for something that handles translation, it needs to be able to support something that's complex like that. It needs to be able to support something that's changing. And so when we're looking at the platform, the ability to create this complex page in the global website first, submit that into a platform like Smartli through WordPress without ever leaving, having their translation teams take it over from there in terms of, okay, this is what their page looks like, how are we going to make this work for us, translate the elements that they do, and then they can just download that back into WordPress automatically. That creates one area that our client has to update, right, with some in the middle of the translation people who are handling in the actual translation management system. They can do theirs in their area. Our web team can stay in our web area, and it just works all together. And more importantly, I think if you're a smaller team, it can work, right? You can be a team of 5 people and it can work, or you can grow that to a 50-person team and still have the workflow set up to work. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing for us is it has to make the back end editing easy. Because again, if it doesn't, people are just going to go around it. They're not going to take the global page and they're not going to update it. They're just going to make one on the French side, and you're going to lose that continuity. You're going to lose the tie between everything, because as soon as something isn't easy, people are going to find workarounds.
As a marketer, Max, how important is that tooling capability for you? I think one of the points that Kevin made, which resonates deeply with me, and I'm sure many people listening, is that managing local language content is far more complex than people may think on the, from the outside, because the scale of creating local language content is just massive. So how does this impact your world?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, but the best thing that we found is just the simplicity of it. So you can do the majority of our bulk translations from the website without even leaving WordPress, really. They're actually the way we built our team, I think, is a bit more our processes is a bit more in depth, but we could do the entire process without even leaving WordPress, and that's really important, because to a certain point, no matter how large the team is in each region, they only really need to be onboarded in one platform. If they're in WordPress and they're trained on WordPress, they know that the page is going to come back in their language, and then they can do everything themselves from there. But actually having this stack has really helped us, build those processes out, and supported by the really, really robust sort of self-serve user guides that everyone's been using and can understand, both from KPS3 standpoint in WordPress and the various elements and the templates that Kevin was talking about, but also from Smartli, means that we can just hand that over and people are able to completely self-serve and manage their own sites autonomously.
Kevin, the last point that you wanted to share and get a little bit deeper into as it relates to the process of creating a robust digital experience is creativity.
Yeah, so when we look at all these, right, and to this point, we've just done prep work. I think on a project this large, you look at it and, everybody wants to get to design quickly. That's something that everybody likes seeing what the new homepage looks like. Everybody likes seeing what the new website's going to look like. And so a lot of the time the planning can go by the wayside for some of that, UI and visual design. But we've spent, a month doing research, getting to the teams on the same page, talking about the company goals versus the platform goals versus what customers actually want, and trying to find what the story is that we can tell in there. And so typically the culmination of that is, what we call a guiding principles document, which recaps everything that we've learned, as well as these tools and recommendations for the process. And what we take from that and what we try to include at the end, right, is a point of view. What is our recommendation for this? We often like to be seen as a partner, right? Not a vendor. That's kind of how we've always pitched ourselves as an agency. There's plenty of places there'll be a great vendor that are going to do exactly what you want and you can tell them what to do. One of our internal mottos is challenge everything. So that's usually not what's happening, right? We are trying to find the data and we are trying to figure out insights, and we are going to propose what we think's work best. And a lot of that is a creative solution. It's creativity from a variety of departments. It can be creative from the account side. It can be creative from the design side. It can be creative from the digital marketing side in terms of how we personalize content based on just an individual actual company coming here. And what we ended up doing was, kind of presenting two approaches based on what we've learned. We have the pathway one, which was a mature SaaS company. Contentsquare has grown leaps and bounds over the years, and your website needed to mature. This is an experience that's probably pretty typical for what you see on the website. It's got long scrolling pages. There's elements about it. There's probably a logo grid somewhere on there. The navigation has solutions and products and resources, all the terms that you would come to expect. And that felt fine. It felt like it would work. It felt like we could still make that website and show positive leads and growth. But we wanted to also present pathway 2, which was Contentsquare is the leader in this space, right? On your homepage and looking at these personas, stop trying to tell every single person and justify everything that you do. You are the leader. You are the global person. They want to hear about your success stories. They want to hear about the companies you've acquired. They want to get the feeling that you are a global company. And with that, we have opportunity to be more simple. And so we pitched a homepage that had 3 sections on it. It didn't have much scrolling at all. It had, 5 navigation items, most of which the verbiage is not consistent across, at the time, competitors or other areas in the space. And them being large enough and growing fast enough kind of enabled that approach. But it was also them being bold enough to say, yeah, we are the leader here and we can kind of own and drive our own experience and not just have everything that everyone else is doing. And so ultimately kind of that creativity that came out of the process, that's what allowed us to set the framework and actually start designing in a creative way, right? It was the tools, it was the data, it was the research, and ultimately this kind of singular approach that we're able to present that everyone got on board with, that then we got to say, oh, okay, awesome. Now it's time to design, but everyone is excited about the direction. And we weren't doing that, in the design stage. So once we did decide on that, we started to build out the style guide, the components. We began looking at content strategy and build out. And from there, because of our planning and because of the tools, when it got time for Max and his team to take over, they were able to populate it and scale it easily and nicely.
Yeah. And Max, when you were involved in this process, what were you thinking about as it relates to the translation of these properties, and how did that impact the creativity that Kevin and your team also brought to the development cycle?
It's a really good question. We always had the plan to translate and launch 7 different versions of the same site, but initially we were writing for the global site, so we were writing in English. So there was a lot of conversation internally based on Kevin's designs and what KPS3 put forward as to, okay, well, what do we write in English that is actually going to translate? Because we can write as much as we want for the audience in the US, but if we're sending it through the Smartli platform to your translation resources, we need it in a language that they're going to understand, so that they won't need our input for the glossary or whatever it might be. So there was a lot of conversation across all of our regions in that, okay, how do we tell this story in a way that will translate simply and easily without too much customization of the words, at least, on that. And we launched the global site first in English, and then 2 weeks later, so we're at what's phase 2 here, we were allowed to publish the full site in French, having sent about 20,000 words through Smartli, had them back on the site, all proofread by our French-speaking writers, with new images and the localized content, and the customized images, customized banners and headers and everything that was there, in 2 weeks. We then repeated that process with Germany, and as we're going through this process, the teams are getting smaller and smaller. So we needed that process to be really streamlined, because we would have less internal resource to actually go through the proofreading and the customization and localization of that. So we repeated that with Germany, I think within about 3 weeks after France. And by the time we got to the Spanish and Italian sites, the process was so slick that the time from when they received the translations in Smartli to proofread to deployment of the site was less than 48 hours for those 2 websites. And that's one person in each region doing that, which I think is a pretty incredible achievement in anyone's book, but it just shows the strength of and robustness of the process that Kevin and his team built out, and the stack that we put together.
There were 2 things in this that were really important for us as well on our side. And the first one was, originally we didn't plan on staggering the launch, right? When we went through the process and started at the beginning of the quarter, we planned on launching with 5 languages. But because of the tools that we had set up and we had the English and the UK websites done, there was an internal push to try to launch those early. And we were able to launch those 2 websites earlier than expected while still maintaining, the development of those other language websites and then launching those as well instead of delaying the entire project. And the other great thing was we didn't have to be involved really outside of some training and some light assistance on the spinning up of the new languages. So with everything that we've put together, the entire creation of those new languages and those experiences, that's in Contentsquare's hands. They can spin up the new website. They can pick the locales for it. We have a user guide on what to do. And so the waiting on the dev team, right? The waiting on the agency, the turnaround on that was a whole piece that was cut out of the process because of how it was planned and how we worked together to build it.
And and the way you built it enables your regional marketing teams, Max, to use the global website, but also create regional elements on region-specific domains.
Exactly that. I mean, not just in terms of their own website, but they can pick and choose from other websites and just simply copy stuff across and translate or change an image. So it's not even that they have to go and build these things out themselves. The joy of this process, from my point of view, is that everything can be done autonomously by the people in each region, and they can manage their own site without needing too much technical or web prowess at all, or knowledge. And it's giving them, the scope to create bespoke or customized versions of a page or an element or an experience, while maintaining the branded experience that we want our customers and our prospects to have across the globe.
And as you both alluded to earlier, because of the way that KPS3 developed the website and partnered with Smartli, with you, Max, is that you don't actually need developers involved to update or launch new languages. It's all done through WordPress with the implementation that you have with Smartli. So people don't have to go into multiple platforms. There's no email-based workflow to get the translations done. It's all managed within WordPress.
Exactly that. And through the documentation and the style guide that we got, that we can share with the teams, they don't even need internal sign off to then go and make these changes themselves. So because every element is built and customized to our specifications, they can go and upload an image because they've got everything that they need. They don't need to get everything signed off. They've got, their own design teams, within the global, design organization that we've got here, and they can do that themselves.
So what's really cool is that Smartli has this translation management system that allows project managers to log in and configure all of the workflows and all of the linguistic assets that are needed to translate and localize content effectively. You can also communicate with linguists directly in the translation management system, but the TMS is not really useful unless you can get content into it. And one of the ways that we can capture WordPress content is by utilizing the integration that we have pre-built with WordPress. So it's very easy to set it up. Kevin, this is your second time setting up Smartli's WordPress integration. Super easy to integrate the multiple workflows that either leverage human or machine translation. It's very easy to configure the WordPress site to identify who is looking at your website, and then it will serve the right web experience based on their locale. And of course, we're capturing visual context with each string submitted to Smartli so that as the translator is working on the content, they can actually see what it's going to look like with context on the website. WordPress is one way to integrate Smartli. The WordPress integration is one way to integrate Smartli with a WordPress site, but we also have a global delivery network, which is the HTTPS web proxy that can layer on top of a property and serve as your infrastructure as well. So there are multiple approaches that WordPress developers and marketing organizations can take to localize a WordPress site. Kevin, you alluded earlier to the multifaceted challenge that is inherent with translation and localization. Two of the ways that we address this is with software and translation services. So I just spoke about the software. We have that translation management system where you can easily manage the translation process. We also have integrations like WordPress, and we have one with Contentful and a lot of other CMSs. But Max, you also leverage our language services, the actual translators who work on the content. What has that experience been like for you and your team?
It's been really useful. It's been and we can do it in all directions. So because we produce a lot of content out of the regions, it's not just that we're sending English content to be translated in every language. We've got so many new reports or analyses or white papers coming out of France that we may go, actually this is really useful for English, and it can work in both ways. So the teams again can go in and do this autonomously. But I think the strongest thing that we are using with those language services is the glossary and the language memory. They're really useful for us in terms of speed of getting things turned around, because whenever something is a document is translated, it remembers paragraphs, sentences, whole chunks of text, and we don't need to either wait for that to be translated or pay for that to be translated again when it's already been done already. And I think that benefits everybody within the business in terms of turning around. And we use it for all sorts of things, from sales presentations through white papers, through we're still doing web page updates. It's now being used by more and more people within the business over the last couple of months.
One of the unique aspects of Smartling is that everything is in the cloud. So every data point or every action that's taken in translation is captured and can be mined to reuse information. And you mentioned the translation memory. Because that is a cloud-based translation memory, as soon as a translator saves a translation, it can be reused the next second. So it's a really slick and automated way for translators to stay connected with one another, and ultimately to drive down cost for our customers, because they don't have to retranslate that content. They don't have to worry about translators not having the most updated assets. It's all just at their fingertips. So at the end of the day, Max and Kevin, what you guys have built is a fully automated content management workflow, not just for one language, but for many. What has this been like for you, Max, in terms of like how is everybody utilizing these technologies? What is the scale of the team, and how is it all coming together?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of regular users of both the web, the back end of the website, we're probably on 15 worldwide. Within the Smartling tool itself, I think we're probably a little bit higher than that, because people need their translations outside of the digital content. But it covers so much of what we do that it's just, again, it's a really autonomous process, and people are able to go and do that themselves without the need for a central project manager or somebody to go in and approve or wait for translations to come through. They can set their own deadlines. They can set their own budgets for whatever translations they need, and it means that they can get stuff done quickly and within their own project plans.
For sure. Yeah, and it's so cool because as we've said, as they create content in WordPress, which is the product that KPS3 built out for you, the content can be automatically submitted to Smartling. The translators log in. Everyone's working on these two platforms, so it's super easy to track the whole process.
Exactly.
All right. So
yeah, sorry, just to carry on. And key is also that the translation memory remembers the 20,000 words that we did at the beginning of the year, so that when we come to documentation now that's still outside of the website, that's still there, and that the glossary that we've been updating constantly in every language really helps the translators get stuff through quickly as well. So it's the translation memory as well as the glossary that we've got, I think is making everything a lot more seamless than we expected it to.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make, because we've spent a lot of time talking about the marketing website today. and we're going to show some results of all of the work that you guys did in just a moment. But it's worth noting that it's not just marketing content that can be put through the platform, and it's not just marketing content that your team puts through the platform. We have integrations with help centers. There are PIM systems that customers use to translate content. There's a plethora of content types that can be submitted to Smartling. So that's a really solid point. So Max, Kevin, after all of the data, after all of the build out, and now the project has been in flight for a number of months now, what have been some of the results?
So, I mean, as you said, we're a few months post-launch now. We've still got one more left to launch this year, fingers crossed. But there are, different success metrics that we could have used, but we decided that actually probably organic traffic would give us the best view of how the experience was being used. And so far, things are looking pretty promising. When we looked at the global organic traffic for the 45 days after launch, compared to the 45 days before, as I said earlier on this hour, the growth in demo requests is about 76%. We've seen a decrease in bounce rate by about 14%. And key to us actually is the session duration is up by about 12 seconds per user, which shows that people are really engaging with the pages and the content and the structure that we've built, and spending far more time using that content and learning what it is that we do and why it's relevant to them. And yeah, we're also using Contentsquare on top of the current website to just constantly optimize what it is that we're doing. While the numbers that I've just shown you suggest that everything's moving in the right direction, we've already found more areas for improvement. So things like unclickable areas of the site, so images or headers, have a really high click recurrence. And we didn't expect that when we went into and we built the site, but actually being able to constantly optimize really helps us build that better user journey and user experience that we're looking for. What else? There was one more thing I was going to say. We've also just discovered some really exciting ways to personalize content to help visitors progress through the journey that they want to take and get to know us the way that they want to. And that is something that the marketing team can go and use and implement in an iterative process, so that we're constantly doing that. It's not, okay, great, we've done the site, let's leave it for 2 years. We're changing this on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to optimize against the users that we want in each region. That's not just happening at a global level.
That's what I like as well as part of this, and just seeing, we get to be involved in the start of the process, and we form all these hypotheses around what will happen, and give this pitch on an experience that will convert and be better. And ultimately, like, yes, at the beginning it did, but that doesn't mean that it's as good as it can be. It doesn't mean that it's done. It doesn't mean that throughout the design process our teams did not agree on things and make mistakes, right? And so being able to go back and being able to spend our effort, right, all of the translation flow and working through all of that, we don't ever have to hear about, outside of updates happening or us adding new features. We don't have to spend our time doing that. We don't have to spend our time making just one-off pages every other week for the client. What we get to do is we get to talk with Max, we get to analyze how the website is doing, and we get to collaborate on, okay, look at all these things that we have found since we've redone this, and how can we make those better? And putting the effort in the right spot because of everything that's been built. That part to me is really, really great. Because we get to focus on that. We get to spend the time to review the mistakes that we made. We get to learn from that. We get to continuously iterate again on this set of components that people have a hard time messing up from site to site. And it looks great. It's a branded experience across any locale, but each one is still regionalized enough to convert highly. And then we get to analyze those even more and keep making improvements. And so the time is just better spent for us working on things like that. And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I take from the project is this is the way that it should be done, right? This is a model use case for us on how we have collaborated with this client and continue to grow and help improve things, and that our work is not done.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think from our point of view, an additional learning on top of that, using our platform and knowing the data like we do with our customers, is that one, you know, the thing that's right is right for you. You shouldn't be comparing necessarily yourself with your competitors, looking at their site saying, oh, well, they've got this and they've got that, because actually the data says this when you're building your site, but 3 months down the road, they're also going through the same process and completely, you know, changing the experience and optimizing it themselves. So it's really important to do to use the data that you have on your own site and figure it out for your users.
Awesome. This has been such a great chat. I really appreciate you both preparing for today's webinar, and I feel like the results are so cool. Oftentimes in translation and localization, it's hard to pinpoint results. And I think that you've pinpointed a really interesting way to track the efficacy, not just of translation and localization, but of an entire reapproach to creating a digital end user experience, looking at bounce rate, looking at time spent on site, looking at demo requests. All of these things together help to paint a picture for how to grow a business. And as you both said in very humble terms, the work isn't over. You know, it is just the beginning. Once you launch a new website, you have to continuously look back and optimize. But the one thing that I'm going to take away from this is that if you don't have the right tools in place, you cannot do the work of evaluation and then engineering elements of a property to realize more results. So that's why it's so important to work with a great development partner like KPS3. It's why it's important to have a strong language translation technology in place like Smartli. And that's why it's important to have great customers like Max who have the vision and foresight to put all of these pieces together. So with that, thank you, Max. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you so much to everybody who's joined today. Really appreciate having you here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adrian. Great to be here.
Thanks, Adrian.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.